Hi YouTube, Folio Society reviewer here today to showcase Misery by Stephen King, illustrated by Edward Kinsella. A taut, gripping thriller, Misery is arguably Stephen King's greatest novel. Award-winning illustrator Edward Kinsella's deeply haunting artwork and striking binding design make this the ultimate collector's edition. 2 weeks after a near-fatal car crash, author Paul Sheldon regains consciousness in a stranger's guest room. His legs are shattered and useless. As the intense pain ebbs and flows, rare moments of lucidity lead to the chilling realization that his rescuer is also his jailer. Annie Wilkes might be Paul's #1 fan, but she is incensed that he has killed the heroine Misery Chastain in his latest novel. Fate has given Annie a chance to bring her favorite character back to life, and Paul won't be leaving Annie's remote farmstead alive until he complies. Misery sees Stephen King at the height of his writing power in a novel that explores the psyche of an author suffering extreme torment. Edward Kinsella has illustrated the best-selling Folio Society edition of The Shining, and he again immersed himself in King's narrative to create a terrifying and compelling set of illustrations, as well as a binding design that defines the novel, the antique royal typewriter that is both Paul Sheldon's entrapment and his only hope of liberty. Production details on this are it's bound in block metallic cloth, set in Maxime with Typeka, has 360 pages, black and white illustrated title page, and 8 color illustrations. It has printed end papers, a plain slipcase, and measures 10 by 6 3/4 inches. Misery is one of the books that I've been hoping that the Folio Society would produce for a very long time. At the end of this showcase, where I showcase the fantastic collector's edition here, I will be talking about what makes Misery such a fantastic story and why I believe it is Stephen King's greatest novel. So I hope you will stick around to hear the rest of that at the end. But let's go ahead and jump into the book. We know I like to look at the slipcase. The slipcase is just a standard slipcase. When you buy a Folio Society book, all their books come with slipcases. So it's standard thickness, it's nice, it's great that they have that to protect the book, but it is just a standard slipcase. There's nothing fancy about it. So whenever we look at the cover, I thought it was great that they continued the same design as they did for The Shining, with the gunmetal black cloth on the outside, which feels great. It has a nice, glossy, smooth feel to it. And then they also put this silver and red, just as they did for their edition of The Shining, which is no longer in print. One of the coolest touches on this book is the missing key on the typewriter. It is a minor spoiler, but one of the aspects of the story is that Paul Sheldon is forced to rewrite a novel using a typewriter that has a missing key of the letter N, which is just another example of how horrible of a situation he is in and just how the smallest things can seem so torturous in the environment that he is put into. So I really like the silver, I really like the red design, I really like that they chose to do the royal typewriter there. The spine looks great, similar to their edition of The Shining. It has the silver and red, and that nice metallic black cloth goes onto the back. You can see the band is also red. Now, why should you choose this edition over other editions? Well, first off, it is a high-end edition with acid-free paper. It's just a great binding, sewn binding. But one of the things that I felt like was one of the big selling points for me, other than I would have probably bought this no matter what because it is one of my favorite books, is that they researched the exact type that the royal typewriter used in the book by Paul Sheldon, our main character. They researched that and they used that for these end papers. So this is the exact royal typewriter typing that he would have used as he wrote the book. And minor spoiler, because it is missing the typewriter was missing the letter N, Paul Sheldon had to handwrite the N's in. Annie Wilkes made him do that. So I will be giving some minor spoilers away, but I will say that some of the illustrations that you will see today, these custom illustrations, do spoil parts of the story. So if that's going to bother you, I would say don't watch this showcase, but you probably want to see them and see the great artwork that's there and just take a peek at it. So silver and black, that is silver. It looks a little like white on the camera, but it is silver and black there. And we'll talk about what the typewriter represents in just a minute when we start getting into this. So there's your title page, and there's our first black and white illustration by Edward Kinsella. So the beginning of the book, the car has crashed. Paul Sheldon has finished writing up a book. He's glad to be finished with it. And he's on the road in a snowstorm and crashes. And Annie Wilkes finds him and takes him to her home in the middle of nowhere. It's printed on Abbey wove paper in Germany, 2021. There's our illustrations page. One downside to this edition, I really wish they would have found a way to get a custom introduction in this. I really think it would have been cool if Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, would have done an introduction for this book. That's one of the big selling points to Folio Society, is they do have those custom introductions oftentimes, but for their edition here, they chose not to. So part 1, Annie. And one thing I should say about Annie Wilkes, you will never forget her if you read this story. She will be one of those characters that stay in your mind for a long time. In fact, Stephen King himself said that if he had to be put in quarantine with any of the characters he's ever written, which one he would not want to be with the most would be Annie Wilkes from this book. Now, if that doesn't tell you how terrifying she is, I don't know what else to say. So let's go ahead and jump into those illustrations. I thought Edward Kinsella did a great job on these illustrations. For my money, I thought he did better in this edition than even in The Shining. So let's get some nice close-ups on that. And you can get a good look. It does use a glossy paper. And I love how Edward Kinsella, on some illustrations, he shows a lot of detail in the face and in different parts of the illustration, but then other parts aren't as detailed, just like the curtains are kind of just simple and the bed railing. We'll take a look at the text in a minute and how the text is set up. So not a lot of detail on the face on this illustration. So I really like how the illustrations are all so unique in their own ways. Okay, before we look at the illustration, one of the plot elements of the story is that Annie Wilkes is upset about how Paul has written his last book and how he's killed off one of her favorite characters. So she forces him to retype the book and using the typewriter without the letter N. And so you can see in here, you can see the regular text for the story, but you can also see the custom text using that Royal Typewriter style of font used for when he's rewriting the story. One of the things that people they're kind of divided on, which I should say, is whether or not they like these added parts here. I believe Paul Sheldon was he was writing a historical fiction story about Misery Chastain. So that would be historical fiction right there. And that part, it's kind of like getting you in the mind of him as a writer. So let's look at the illustration now. Very cool. Now this is a spoiler for sure. You can see the glass is broken and you can see the reflection of a police officer. Really nice illustration. Maybe my favorite illustration in this set. And I'm sorry for the glare. And I believe this is our last illustration. I do apologize if I accidentally skipped any illustrations. I don't believe I did, but this is our last one here. So, obviously those end papers are including the typing that Paul Sheldon, the character, has been doing to rewrite the book for Annie Wilkes in the way that she would see fit. So that is really cool that they researched that typewriter and they got that perfect. The illustrations are great, perfectly bound book, and an ultimate collector's edition. So why do I love Misery so much? Why do I think it's Stephen King's best book? Well, it's truly a terrifying story. Just Paul Sheldon, the things that he has to go through in the story are just unimaginable. Yet they do seem realistic. They don't seem too far-fetched. If somebody that was somebody's crazy #1 fan did capture somebody, I can see them doing a lot of the things that Annie Wilkes did do, obviously. Really a terrifying story, and you get to see a lot of the background on Annie and how she got to be the way she was. And I thought it was really well written and that. I think that the book is the perfect length. My biggest problem with Stephen King is I feel like his books are too long. I feel like he puts in too many details that I don't find that interesting. I mean, this is already a pretty long book, 360 pages. That's a decent sized book. And I don't want to keep reading and reading a lot about things that don't really keep the plot moving along at a good pace. So for me, I love the pace of this book. I think it's the perfect length. I also think it's really interesting how he put in the character of Paul Sheldon rewriting the book of that historical fiction book for Annie. I know I had heard that Stephen King was going through a rough time when he wrote Misery. Apparently he had wrote a fantasy book and I can't remember what it was. And it didn't get well received. And so he wrote this book afterwards. And I'm wondering if it's kind of a reflection of his feelings and his mood at the time, and if there's anything to it. I do think it would have been cool if in the story Paul Sheldon was, instead of a historical fiction writer, more of a horror genre writer, just because I feel like that's something that Annie Wilkes would have been interested in was the horror genre, just based off of how creepy her character is. I could have seen her being just as interested in that. And I also think that it could have advanced the story in many interesting ways if instead of him being a historical fiction writer, he was maybe a horror genre writer. I think that there was a lot he could have done with that, but I think it's fine the way he did it. The plot does move at a wonderful pace. There are very few characters in the story, but they're very well developed. Sometimes I feel like Stephen King has so many characters and he tries to overdevelop them. That's my opinion. It's just like so many nitty-gritty details, but when you have just a few characters that you're developing in that relationship with each other, it really makes it an interesting story. So the ultimate reason why I love this book is because it's just a cool idea. It's just really well done. The idea of somebody's #1 fan capturing them and holding them hostage and forcing them to do something and torturing them in so many little ways. Just even using the typewriter with the missing key and forcing him to handwrite those ends in, among the other truly graphic things that she does to torture him. Those are just the things that make this such a cool book, such a cool story, and one that is just unforgettable for me. So one last thing I want to say is this is a pretty frightening book. If you read this book and you don't get a little bit scared, you might have some issues, no offense. Annie Wilkes is truly an evil, evil woman. And you will see that if you read this book, and I hope that you will. I hope you enjoyed this showcase. If you do decide to purchase based off of this showcase, I hope that you will please come back and leave a comment and say, I purchased this book because of your showcase. That was part of the reason I decided to get it. And I hope that you really do enjoy the book. For me, it was an awesome experience reading it. It's my favorite Stephen King book. And I'm so thankful that they decided to publish this book, and I hope they'll continue more of his work in the future. Thanks a lot, guys. Give me a thumbs up. I hope you'll subscribe. See you later.